So you and I mentor people, and one of the biggest prefaces that you and I always say is what's really important is prioritization and sequencing. And although it sounds very logical on the surface, one of the things that I get back is like, what do you mean? Why? Why is this important? Why can't I have 2 or 3 or 4 things happening at the same time? Because I'm a wonder person. I'm a business owner. I can just achieve it all. And it's like, well, it's just a matter of priority and it's a matter of sequencing. And so it was one point that I just keep getting asked, and I'm like, I got to ask this on the pod because I think we got to make sure that we dive deeper into it so other people sort of can understand the concept at a lower level. So my question to you, Charlie, is like, what do you mean by prioritization and sequencing?
Yeah, so prioritization is picking the most important thing to work on. And then sequencing would be the order of which you work on things next after that. So you might have 5 things you need to do. You need to pick which of the 5 is the most important, and then the second most, the third most, the fourth most, and so on. But then there's this layer to it of like, well, how many can you do at once? So for some people, what I have seen, and again, never done, is if there's 5 priorities, I'll just go and do all 5 priorities at once.
Totally.
I will not prioritize or sequence them. And my finding in myself and others, this isn't just a shit on Charlie, this is what I see, is many business owners will take on too much at once and then do many things poorly, and then it ends up taking much longer and being done, as I said, poorly. Now, it's very, very challenging, and I'll say the symptom I see is when a business owner plans, they seem to plan to their capacity. So if they've got 10 hours spare, they say, well, I'm going to fill up all 10 hours, completely forgetting the idea that when does business ever go perfect? It's not like an emergency could come up or a change that would need some of those 10 hours, or you got to take a call, or a kid is sick, or your wife needs you, or you're sick, or whatever it is. So what ends up happening is maybe they could have done those several priorities, but instead they end up doing many of them poorly, condensed into a smaller time block, because life and business happens. So sequencing and prioritization is the strategy to actually getting things done at a higher standard.
Yeah, and the way I always articulate it is that when it comes to sequencing, there is no 2 things that happen first. There's no 2 things that happen second. It's a sequence. It is a numbered list. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Like you can't have 2 1s. You can't have 4 4s. It's a sequence of 1. And then a lot of people go, well, why? Why can't I have 2 number 1s? I'm like, I get the point that you're making, right? I understand it, but it just can't work that way. There's always one thing that needs to happen before everything else, and then there's another thing that needs to happen after it, or otherwise what you're going to do is exactly what you mentioned. You're going to do everything half-assed. And so I actually had a conversation with someone literally, it was 2 days ago, where they're trying to do a rebrand, but they're also trying to do like a video shoot. And they listen to this podcast, so they know exactly who they are. Hey, and they wanted to do both of them at the same time. Like, I want to plan for this awesome photo shoot, and I want to do this rebrand at the same time. I said, that's awesome. Now imagine you did the photo shoot planning first, and you completed that to 100% of your capability, and then you did the rebrand next to 100% of your capability, and you just sequence it, as opposed to doing the photo shoot at 80% and the rebrand at 80%, and you have 80% of the outcome. I'm like, which one's actually going to create a better result for the business? And obviously it's doing 100% as opposed to 80s. And so for them, it was like, oh, I'm not actually giving up a lot in order to do that sequentially. Do this thing first and then that thing second, because you're still going to have the same outcome for them. Like there was no impact on the other side of if one thing was done a week later or a couple of days later. And so that was a great articulation around like, this is the sequence and the priority. And the reason the photo shoot was so more important than the rebrand was because the talent was already booked in. You can't move the talent. I'm like,
that would make it the priority, right? If you've got a hard date on something, you have to prioritize accordingly.
Yeah.
Where does this come from? Do you feel like this is just like a high achiever syndrome? The idea of doing things one at a time makes us think it's more slowly happening, even though it's not. But it's like some sort of like mental thing.
But it's also, I think, from my experience and through working with the CEOs of sort of some of the companies that I work with, I think that the challenge that they've got is how do you choose which child's your favorite? How do you choose which one's more important to work on right now? Like I can see this one's more important because it's going to impact revenue, and this point's more important because it's going to help scalability. It's like neither of them are more important. And so they can't actually decide. So it's like this paralysis analysis where it's like, well, no, both of them have to happen. At the one time, it's like, well, no, in actual fact, which one is more important? Like what, if you don't get this one done for a couple of days, what's the impact versus the other one? What are you actually foregoing? And I think the problem is that we don't actually think critically enough of the things that we're working on. We're just thinking of it like a to-do list, and we're trying to work through these things because we love putting out fires. We love jumping on things, squashing them and going, done. And looking at a list at the end of the day saying, yay, win. Even though the one or two things at the top of the list are never done. And they're always the ones that like keep popping up in the calendar and keep appearing. I'm like, it's like everything else is like what not to do. And that one is it. Like that is it. But I think a lot of people just don't want to choose that because usually it is the thing they're uncomfortable about. Maybe it is because they're uncomfortable about doing sales. So they just put it on the back burner and they just don't want to do it, even though that is probably the number one thing they probably should do is do the sales. Or they're not comfortable doing operations. And so they keep pushing it back.
So you kind of looped points here. So I want to break this one down. The first one I think most people will agree with is like doing one thing at a time is more efficient than doing two things at once. Like if you've got a plate full of Rubik's Cubes, it doesn't make sense trying to solve two Rubik's Cubes at once. You do one and then you move on to the next one. I think everyone can conceptualize doing one thing at a time is more efficient and gets a better result. The prioritization thing, though, is where this gets a bit more interesting because deciding which Rubik's Cube to focus on when they all seemingly are important and could be important challenges people because they feel like that is there. How would you encourage someone prioritizes?
Yeah. So I always come back to critical chain management. It's like I got a hose, right? And my goal is to just get the water flowing through that hose, right? So it could be $10,000 a month is the profit that I'm going for, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. And this hose has got 10 kinks in it, Charlie. All I need to do is unkink all those 10 kinks, and I make my $10,000 a month. What a lot of people do is they start looking for kinks, and they might remove kink number 4. The flow doesn't improve. They remove kink number 8. Flow doesn't improve. What they need to do is they need to remove kink number 1, number 2, number 3 in order for that water to start flowing through the hose to get to the outcome they're going for. And so the thought process is more, what is the one major blocker that is really impacting that flow in order for me to get towards my 10,000? Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into creating wealth inside and outside your business, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.